Hello, welcome back to our next lesson. Today we are going to be focusing on setting up and solving equations with rational expressions. So we're going to use a lot of the same techniques that we did in our previous lesson, particularly the one we were adding and subtracting. And we're going to modify it a slight bit so that way we can figure out solutions to the equations that are posted. So you have an example laid out before you on your notes, and you can kind of read through it. There's a few steps here that are similar as to the one before. For instance, we're still going to factor our denominators. So you'll notice that you have this expression here, which looks a lot like the other one, except that we have an equal sign thrown in. So you'll notice that this x squared minus 8x plus 12, well, that's going to factor to x minus 2 times x minus 6. Well, then we're going to figure out the restrictions again and get the domain. So again, x cannot be 0 on the denominator, so x can't be 2 or 6 in this scenario. So all real numbers except 2 and 6 would be your domain. And we're going to still get the common denominators like we did in the previous lesson. So you'll notice that this x minus 2 is lacking in x minus 6. So we throw that on the bottom and on the top as well. And this x minus 6 is lacking in x minus 2. So we'll throw that on the bottom and top next to that fraction. This fraction has both of them, so I don't have to do anything with it. The difference is right here is where it kind of splits off. Because we have an equation, now we're focused on figuring out what value of x is going to make that equation true. So we just look at the numerator here, just that top part of the fraction, and solve that equation. So we have 4 equals x times x minus 6 plus 1 times x minus 2. Sometimes there's other numbers in there, so you'll have to distribute that. In this case, we're going to get a quadratic, so that's x squared minus 6x, and this is x minus 2. So if we combine like terms and subtract this 4 from the left side, we'll get minus 6, and that'll factor to x minus 6, x plus 1, set your factors equal to 0, and you have two solutions, x equals 6 and x equals negative 1. Looks like I crossed that one out. Let's explore why. So on these problems, you got to be very careful because we had stated some restrictions that x cannot be equal to 2 and x cannot be equal to 6. So when you get an answer, and this doesn't happen all the time, but when you get an answer that matches one of your restrictions, well, it's not really an answer. Because if I plug 6 into here, I'm going to get an error message. And, well, I can't really solve an equation that has an error. We can't divide by 0. So the only real solution is x equals negative 1. So we consider that 6 an extraneous solution. So let's get into the examples. Now I want to solve example 1. So I have 3 over 2x plus 6 plus 5 over 2 equals 1 over x plus 3. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor the denominator. So 3 over 2x plus 6, well, what can go out of 2x and 6? That's going to be 2. And so I'm going to be left with x plus 3 there. 5 over 2 can't really be factored. Neither can x plus 3. So this is a pretty simple factor, just a GCF. Now what we want to do on this problem is we want to get our common denominators. So we have a 2 and an x plus 3, which this left fraction has. I don't have to do anything with it. But this 2 needs an x plus 3. So I'm going to throw that next to it and on the top, on the numerator. This x plus 3 needs a 2. So I'm going to throw a 2 there and a 2 there. So once I have that redone, then I'm going to simply take the numerator, basically solve that equation that I circled. Okay, ignore the denominator, although let's get the restrictions first. The restrictions, well, there's only one restriction, and that's going to be x cannot equal negative 3, because that's just 2, so that's not really a restriction. So we say 3 plus 5 parentheses x plus 3 equals 2 times 1, which is 2. And so I'm going to distribute that 5. 3 plus 5x plus 15. Let's combine our like terms. So 5x plus 3 and 15 is 18. And this is a linear equation, so the best method to solve those is to get the numbers on the right side. So I'm going to subtract the 18. 5x equals negative 16. And then my last step would be to divide by 5. And 5 does not go into 16 evenly, so we can leave it as long as it's reduced, negative 16 over 5. Now, since that is not the same number as my restriction, that's a valid answer. So we'll go ahead and circle that. And that's all we have on question number 1. Question number 2. All right, this has some x's involved. If you'd like, you can try to pause it and see if you can do it on your own. You may look at the worked out example for you on the front of the sheet if that's helpful for you, or the one we just did. So take a minute to pause it, and I'll work it out with you now. So if you need some additional help, just keep watching. I'm going to rewrite this out real quick. X minus 3 and x plus 3 do not factor, but I know x squared minus 9 does. So that's going to be x plus 3, x minus 3. So there's the factored form. Now you can tell these are basically the same denominators here. We just got to write them, copy the same ones over on the left side of the equation. The right side doesn't need anything additional. So I'm going to put x plus 3 next to the x minus 3, and of course on top. And the same thing, I'm going to do x minus 3 next to the x plus 3. Let's look at our restrictions. On the denominator, x cannot be negative 3 or 3. So my restrictions, x cannot equal negative 3 or 3. And remember, we use those when we solve the equation, look back and see if they match our solutions. So let's look at the numerator. Let's solve the equation up top. This is a subtraction problem, so be careful with your signs. It's going to be x parentheses x plus 3 minus x parentheses x minus 3 equals 2. We'll distribute that x and the negative x, and that's going to give you x squared plus 3x minus, well, that's x squared again. Now the negatives here are actually going to give you a plus, so that's plus 3x. And that's equal to 2. So I have an x squared. If I'm combining my like terms, I actually have an x squared and a negative x squared. So those x squareds are going to cancel. So my 3x's will combine to 6x. And of course, that's equal to 2. So if I divide both sides by 6, x is going to be 2 over 6, which actually reduces to 1/3. So my final answer, as long as it doesn't match my restrictions, which it does not, is 1/3. You getting the hang of it? If so, pause the video and try number 3. If you need some additional help, keep watching. All right, here's number 3. All right, I'm going to rewrite this as a factored problem. So this is x minus 1. Well, let's see, x squared plus 3x plus 2. That should be x plus 2 and x plus 1. Now, if you look over here, you know, you're going to see a lot of the same factors that pop up. So kind of use that as a context clue to see, hey, maybe that's going to be a factor of that. Maybe that's going to be a factor of that. You know, especially if you've been kind of struggling with factoring. I know those tricks come in handy sometimes, especially when you take tests. All right, let's get my common denominators. The left one doesn't need anything. The x plus 2 needs an x plus 1. So I'm going to copy that on the top as well. The x plus 1 needs an x plus 2. So I'll copy that. Once again, let's solve the equation on the numerator. First, let's get our restrictions. If I could spell, that would be helpful. X is not equal to -2 or -1 from the denominators. Solving this equation gives me x minus 1 plus 2x parentheses x plus 1 equals x minus 1, x plus 2. So we got a little bit of foiling and distributing going on. This is going to be distributed. We got some foiling here. Let's carefully rewrite that. So that's going to be x minus 1 plus 2x squared plus 2x equals x squared plus 2x minus 1x minus 2. And this is going to end up being a quadratic when we simplify it. So I'm gonna move everything to the left side. Actually, let me combine like terms first. That'll be easier. So that's going to be 2x squared plus 3x minus 1. This is going to be x squared plus 1x minus 2. So it looks like if I bring everything over to this side, that's going to make my life a little bit easier. So I'm going to subtract x squared from both sides. I'm going to subtract 1x from both sides. And I'm going to add 2 to both sides, so that way my right side can be 0. So that's going to be x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. And that's going to be factorable. So that factors to x plus 1. Well, 1 times 1 is 1, so x plus 1 times x plus 1. And so each of these only have one factor, so really it's x plus 1 equals 0. So x is going to equal -1. X is going to equal -1. Now let's look back on our restrictions. So here we have a problem. -2 and -1 are my restrictions. This is saying x cannot equal -1, but I only ended up getting -1 as an answer. So that tells me that this doesn't really have a solution. So this would be considered extraneous, but it's not a real solution. So we would say no solution on this problem. Sometimes that happens, folks, and we just have to get over it and move on with our life. So this is a no solution. This would be an extraneous solution, -1, but there is not a real solution. All right, hopefully it's starting to make more sense. We're moving on to number 4. Again, if you're getting the hang of this, pause the video and try them on your own. I will go ahead and work out question 4 with you if you still need that additional support. All right, question number 4. Well, let's see, I don't have to factor x minus 3 and x plus 1, or 2x minus 3, or 2x plus 1. So no factoring involved to begin with. Let's match up my denominators. This is going to be 2x plus 1 and x plus 1. So I'm going to need a 2x plus 1 over here. And over here, I will need an x plus 1. Let's look at my restrictions. X cannot equal -1, and let's be -1/2. So let's keep that in mind as we're solving. All right, my numerator is my equation, which you can think of this as a proportion too, and cross multiply. That's essentially what this one is. This is going to be 2x plus 1 times x minus 3 equals 2x minus 3 times x plus 1. Doing a little FOIL, first outers, inners, last, first outers, inners, last. And that's going to give me 2x squared minus 6x plus 1x minus 3 equals 2x squared plus 2x minus 3x minus 3. And it looks like we have some quadratics again, so this is going to combine to 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 on the left side and 2x squared minus 1x minus 3 on the right side. All right, so let's get this thing equal to 0. I'm going to go ahead and subtract. Well, these are both 2x's, so they're actually going to cancel out. But for the sake of being consistent, I'll just bring everything to the left side. And let's see how this all pans out. So that's going to cancel out. This is going to be negative 4x. Those will cancel out. Equals 0. Well, let's see. Divide by negative 4. 0 divided by any number is, of course, 0. So that's going to be x equals 0. And that does not match our restrictions. So there is your answer. Now, if you haven't tried one on your own, I'm going to want you to try at least number 5, pause the video, work it out, and see if you can get the answer. All right, last problem, number 5, 2 over x plus 2 over x plus 1 equals negative 2, and I went ahead and took the GCF out of x squared plus x, so it's x times x plus 1. Let's get the common denominators first. This has an x plus 1, it needs an x, so we'll copy an x there on the bottom and the top. And this x needs an x plus 1, so we'll copy an x plus 1 here, the denominator and numerator. And let's get our restrictions. X cannot equal 0 and negative 1. Let's solve our numerator. And so that's going to be 2x plus 2 plus x squared plus 2x equals negative 2. And we're going to have another quadratic. Did you hear that, Mr. McGarry? Call the front office. Combined like terms, it's going to be x squared plus 4x plus 2 equals negative 2. Looks like I'm going to need to move that negative 2 over here, so we'll add that. And that's going to be x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0. Looks like we got a factoring problem again. All right, that's going to be x plus 2, which is x plus 2 squared. So we just need to write it once, solve that out, and x is going to equal negative 2. That's kind of nice, so just one answer. If you look up here, we have restrictions of 0 and negative 1, which does not match it. So there you have it, guys. And hopefully you understand that. You can work on 1 through 10 from the assignment. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.